Good morning and welcome to First Parish Church, otherwise known as FPC. We are a welcoming spiritual community. My name is Russell Hart and I serve on the Religious Education Committee. If this is your first time with us, we welcome you. I'd like to introduce our minister and a few of our staff and invite them to wave if they're present and as they're named. Our minister is the Reverend Cindy Landrum. There you go. Our music director is Brad Dumont. There we go. And our welcoming and membership coordinator is Jolene Trotta, who is probably not here today. And our director of religious education is Michelle Cote, who is there. Welcome. And feel free to ask any of these people for more information about the church and its programs after the service or by email. We also invite you to check out our webpage for news and information, and you can also sign up there for our newsletter and email alerts. For your safety and that of those around you, we ask that you please keep your masks on and properly cover your nose. Please observe 3 feet of social distancing and check with people you're talking to about what distance they would like you to be at. Some restaurants, there's a slip, huh? Thinking about food. Some restrooms are off limits. Please check the signs on the doors. And please make sure the air filters are on when you congregate in any room. After the service, it's our custom to have coffee hour. However, our COVID protocols do not allow us to eat or drink in this building yet, but we're having social time in Fellowship Hall after the service. Please join us for conversation and learn more about FPC. There are a few announcements, but there is one. If you brought a tulip for a service today, please take it home with you at the end of service, or we will find a nice home for it. Please see the order of service for further announcements. As we begin, we would like to acknowledge that this service is being held by a community that gathers on the stolen traditional lands of the Massachusetts Nipmuc, Pawtucket, or Wampanoag people. We pay respect to elders who lost their lives in the colonization of this land and recognize that these indigenous tribes are still today facing violations of sovereignty, territory, and water. We also give thanks for the earth we walk upon and the waters, the life-giving plants, and all of the earth's creatures, as well as the winds, sun, moon, and stars. We recognize this is just a first step in moving towards right relationship with Native people and the healing of the earth. And I think now we get a chance to greet our neighbors.
Yonder come day, day is a breaking. Yonder come day, oh my soul. Oh, yonder come day, day is a breaking. Sun is a rising in my soul. Oh, yonder come day, day is a breaking. Yonder come day, oh my soul. Oh, yonder come day, day is breaking. Sun is rising in my soul. Yonder come day, day is breaking. Yonder come day, oh my soul. Yonder come day, day is breaking. Sun is rising in my soul.
Good morning. Happy Easter. Our opening words are from Elizabeth M. Strong, who was a UU religious educator. Out of the earth rises light, rises life, rises spring. May we join with the miracle that is springtime and enter into life with lightness and joy. Out of the Spirit rises faith, rises hope, rises love. May we join with the miracle that is Easter time and enter into life with hope and love. Let us resurrect with spring. Let us resurrect with the Spirit and enter into renewed life as we gather into our time of worship together this Easter morning. And our chalice lighting words are from the Passover Haggadah. I'm going to ask Brad to light our chalice. May the light we now kindle inspire us to use our powers to heal and not to harm, to help and not to hinder, to bless and not to curse, to serve you, Spirit of freedom. Please rise now in body or in spirit and join in our opening hymn, number 269, Lo, the Day of Days is Here. And please join now in our covenant and affirmation. Love is the spirit of this church, and service its law. This is our great covenant, to dwell together in peace, to seek the truth in love, and to help one another.
Good morning. Oh, that was such a good answer. I had to do it twice at the first service. So we're keeping, for the people on Zoom, we're keeping it a wide span right now and not a close up on me. We're going to go further out because the audience is going to help me there's some people that are planted with some things that they're going to share with us to tell the story of Passover. So Passover is a holiday that is celebrated by people who are Jewish. And one of the things that I like best about our Unitarian Universalist faith is that we embrace all religious traditions. So on Easter is a very important Christian tradition, and I'm glad that we celebrate that here. Passover happens to fall at the same time as Easter this year. It always falls around the same time, but not always on the exact same day. It happens to be during the same time as Easter this year. So we're telling the story of Passover to honor those people in our religious tradition that either grew up Jewish or still embrace the Jewish religion. And so the Passover happened in Egypt, a long time ago. And the Israelites were a group of people, and they lived in Egypt. They were forced to live in Egypt. They were made to be slaves. And that had happened for 400 years. And the Israelites believed in one God that they called God. The Egyptians believed in many gods. So the Israelite God that most people here refer to as God, like the Christian or Jewish people have the one God that they believe in, said to this guy named Moses, you are responsible to help me get the people free, to convince the Pharaoh to let the Israelites go free. And Moses was like, yeah, how am I going to do that? So, but he decided he should obey God. So he went to the Pharaoh, and the Pharaoh, by the way, is a king. And the king was in charge of Egypt and had a lot of power. So Moses went to the Pharaoh and said, God told me to tell you that you must let our people go. You must let my people go. But Pharaoh said no. And then Moses said, well, God told me that he's going to do some pretty bad things if you don't listen. And Pharaoh still said no. So he sent something called plagues, and plagues are disasters to the earth. And the first plague that he sent, if you look back there, that's Justin. And Justin is holding up Brendan. What did I just say? Sorry. Brendan is holding up a red dot, basically. And that represents the blood that God turned the Nile River into blood. So no one could drink and no one could feed their animals. And obviously people got very thirsty. And so Moses said, will you let our people go? And Pharaoh said, no, I will not let your people go. So 7 days passed, and God told Moses, go back, ask Pharaoh again. And Moses said, let my people go. And Pharaoh said no. So then God sent plague number 2. Who was number 2? If you look over towards Hector over here, Hector is holding up a frog, and God sent frogs into every single spot of Egypt, in the houses, in the fields. And obviously people didn't like that. And Pharaoh said, I'll let your people go if you get rid of the frogs. So Moses did. But then guess what Pharaoh did? He said, I changed my mind. I will not let your people go. So then God did plague number 3. And that is a gnat. And it's hard to see, but a gnat is a little tiny bug. And if you've ever seen them, they're so annoying. And he sent them, and they covered all of Egypt except for the Israelites. The Israelites were not bothered at all. Still, Pharaoh's heart was hard, and he wouldn't listen. Then God sent plague number 4, which is flies. And if you look, Michael has a fly in his hand. And the flies were everywhere, once again, all over the land, except in the Israelites. Pharaoh and his people were very unhappy. And the Pharaoh said, I'll let you make your sacrifices, but you can't leave. And Moses prayed, and the flies left. And guess what? Then Pharaoh went back and said, no, sorry, you can't go. And then Moses warned Pharaoh that there'd be another plague. So then he sent plague number 5, which is a cow, and that represents livestock. So God struck down all of the livestock that gave the Egyptians meat and milk and cheese. But still, Pharaoh refused to obey God's command, and all of the livestock died except for the Israelites. Then, that was number 5, right? Number 6. Who was number 6? Now this, if you look closely, and it's hard to see, it's over with Susan Avery. It looks like an arm that has a big white bubble on it. And those are called boils. And God sent boils to cover the bodies of every single Egyptian. And they were really, really painful. Like think of a rash all over your body, but worse. And the Egyptians were in immense pain and very unhappy. But still, the Pharaoh said, I'm not letting your people go. And the next thing was number 7. He sent the plague of 7, which Ruth has it right in front, and it's a square white cube, and it represents hail. And hail, for those of you that might not know, is ice that falls like rain. But this hail was worse than any other hail before. If it struck animals or people, they would die. It destroyed all the plants and trees. Pharaoh called Moses and said, I have sinned. Please pray and make the hail go away. I will let you go. So Moses prayed, and God did let the hail stop. And still, Pharaoh once again hardened his heart and said, I will not let your people go. So then, plague, what number was that, Ruth? Oh, so we're up to 7. And God sent locusts, and it looks like a little grasshopper, except these grasshoppers were everywhere. And all of Egypt's crops were destroyed. And then Moses was told by Pharaoh, I'll let some of you go. But Moses said, no, I'm sorry, that can't either. Everyone goes or you get the plague of locust. And so the locust went everywhere, but still Pharaoh wouldn't give in. So then he sent plague number 8. Who was number 8? 9. Oh, plague number 9, sorry. Who is number 9? Oh, back in the back. It is a black cube, and it represents darkness. God made a great darkness fall over all of Egypt. No one can see or move for 3 days. And Pharaoh called Moses and said, I'll let you go, but your animals will have to remain here. We need them to worship God. Pharaoh's heart grew still harder. Get out of my sight, he said to Moses. Then Moses warned Pharaoh that God had one more extreme plague. It was the very worst of them all. And that's number 10. Who was number 10? And this is really bad. Brad's over here, and he has a little person. And what God and Moses told the Pharaoh is that he would destroy the firstborn of every single family, and they would die unless the Pharaoh gave in and let the Israelites go. And still the Pharaoh said no. But he told the Israelites, Moses went and told all the Israelites that if you sacrifice a lamb and put the lamb's blood around your door, you will be skipped over. You will be passed over so your children don't die. And that's what the Israelites did. And then obviously with all this, with death, the Egyptians got very sad. And the Pharaoh finally called Moses and said, go, you are free. Leave us alone. So Moses and all the people of Israel left Egypt, and God had freed them from slavery. So this is not a true story. For those of you listening, especially kids, this is a story to tell about the Israelis and the Jewish people belief in God, and that God will always have their back and always protect them. It's not a real story. They didn't really kill people, and they didn't really kill animals. They think that actually there might have been a volcano that happened that created some darkness, and that there was clay that got into the river, and that might have created red water. So they used those things to make up a story to tell how important God was and how important embracing their religion was. And so every year they celebrate Passover to remember how important listening to God is. So at this time, I don't have a lantern, and I only have one child coming to Ari, which is Harrison. At the end of the service, and actually there's 3 middle schoolers that are coming to help hide eggs as well. Right after the service or during the service, we're gonna come back in, Harrison, me and Justin. And so you can join your parents for the song. And then after church is over, the 2 5th graders, actually, I don't know what grade you're in, but the 2 older girls and Harrison get to take part in an Easter egg hunt. All right. And cross your fingers that the rain holds off. All right. So Harrison, come on down.
I've had that bag of stuffed plagues for like 20 years. I got it at a Jewish liturgical supply store kind of place in Chicago during seminary. And I was always like, I think these are really funny, but what do I do with them? So it was fun to see Michelle find something creative to do. And thank you all for participating. And of course, while Michelle, wants to make sure that this story is not too scary for our children, there are people in our congregation and people in our society who do take this story literally, just as there are people who take the story of resurrection on Easter morning literally. And we want to honor that diversity of belief in our congregation today. This reading is titled Desert Spring by Victoria E. Safford. They had no idea where they were going when they left that night in the dark, without light, without shoes, without bread. Their children pressed against them so they would make no noise. They had no idea what they were getting into, following this Moses, this wild-eyed one who claimed visions and made promises, but who, after all, could guarantee them nothing except death if they were caught. They had no idea, these slaves, what it could mean, this promise of land, their own country, and life abundant. Of freedom, they knew nothing, except what they could taste by living its opposite, slavery. And that taste became a hunger. And that hunger became insatiable till they were ravenous for freedom. And they went out then. And no one knows to this day whether they were led by Moses or by the outstretched arm and mighty hand of something else, of something eternal, as they would afterwards always claim, or whether their own human hungry will made them flee that night from Pharaoh. They went into the wilderness where they wandered 40 years, which in those days was a lifetime. 40 was a good old age, so many of them died before getting anywhere, and many were born in the desert and grew to adulthood, knowing nothing but the journey, not slavery, not freedom, just the going. They whined and complained, and some mutinied, for they were a stiff-necked and rebellious people. You can read it yourself. Ungrateful people, even when manna rained down from heaven and quails were sent to feed them. In the springtime, we remember the promised land is not a destination. It is a way of going. The land beyond the Jordan, that country of freedom and dignity and laughter, you carry it inside you all the while. It is planted in your mind and heart already, before you ever start out, before it even occurs to you that in order to leave that life in Egypt, the intolerable bondage of that life, what you need to do is stand up and walk forward. Thus ends the reading.
This wide world
We've realized that we might not have had that PowerPoint showing properly so that it was configured properly for the people on Zoom to see. So we're going to repeat it at the end of the service. Oh, no, it was okay. It worked. Great. Well, we may show it again at the end of the service anyway, just to kind of give you a second chance to remember those loved ones while some of us run out and hunt eggs. Thank you, choir, and thank you, Crystal. That was beautiful. Very powerful. Our reading is titled Manifesto, the Mad Farmer Liberation Front by Wendell Berry. Love the quick profit, the annual raise, vacation without pay. Want more of everything ready-made. Be afraid to know your neighbors and to die. And you will have a window in your head. Not even your future will be a mystery anymore. Your mind will be punched in a card and shut away in a little drawer. When they want you to buy something, they will call you. When they want you to die for profit, they will let you know. So friends, every day, do something that won't compute. Do something that won't compute. Love the Lord. Love the world. Work for nothing. Take all that you have and be poor. Love someone who does not deserve it. Denounce the government. Embrace the flag. Hope to live in that free republic for which it stands. Give your approval to all you cannot understand. Praise ignorance, for what man has not encountered, he has not destroyed. Ask the questions that have no answers. Invest in the millennium. Plant sequoias. Say that your main crop is the forest that you did not plant and you will not live to harvest. Say instead that the leaves are harvested when they have rotted into the mold. Call that profit. Prophesy such returns. Plant your faith in the 2 inches of humus that will build under the trees every 1,000 years. Listen to carrion. Put your ear close and hear the faint chattering of the songs that are yet to come. Expect the end of the world. Laugh. Laughter is immeasurable. Be joyful, though you have considered all the facts. So long as women do not go cheap for power, please women more than men. Ask yourself, will this satisfy a woman satisfied to bear a child? Will this disturb the sleep of a woman near to giving birth? Go with your love to the fields, lie easy in the shade, rest your head in her lap, swear allegiance to what is nighest to your thoughts. As soon as the generals and the politicos can predict the motions of your mind, lose it. Leave it as a sign to mark the false trail, the way you didn't go. Be like the fox who makes more paths, more tracks than necessary, some in the wrong direction. Practice resurrection. Thus ends the reading. This month, our plate is shared with one of the organizations that our congregation votes to support throughout the year. This month, the Southeast India Project, which is a project that grew out of our congregation's work to support a orphanage in Southeast India and the community around that orphanage. We send gifts and people and support every year over there. And so for their good work and for the good work of this congregation, we will now gratefully receive the gifts of the congregation.
Where there is light in the soul, there will be beauty. There is light in the soul, where there is beauty in the person. There will be harmony, there will be harmony, there will be harmony. Oh, when there is harmony in the home, there will be honor in where there is honor in the there will be peace in the soul where there is light. Where there is light in the soul, there will be peace. Where there is light,
Happy Easter. I feel like it is quite often, and maybe I'm just completely making up this story, but in my memory, it is the case that quite often on the weekend before Easter, my dad will be talking to me and he will say something like, so Cindy, are you going to preach he is risen this year? Or is it going to be all spring and bunnies and recycling? My family raised me UU, but Christian UU. And the story of the resurrection is an important moment in the Christian faith. According to Christian theology, we are all universally, at least in Universalist Christian theology, we are all universally saved by Jesus's death. We know the story. The women, which women exactly, it's debated a bit between gospels, went to the tomb. They went to anoint the body of Jesus, who had been crucified a couple days before. When they got to the tomb, the stone had been rolled away. And while they were there, they saw an angel, or again, maybe two angels. Again, stories vary. But they were told that Jesus was not there. He had risen, and they fled. And then the disciples were informed, and Jesus came to them and proved that it was he, and that he had died as they knew, but he had returned. Thomas pressed his hands into the wounds in Jesus' side in his disbelief. Here in that church, we can choose to believe that or not. Some of us may believe it literally. Some of us may believe it metaphorically. Some of us could do without the whole thing. But then the resurrection, what does it mean for us? Well, are you settled in for a big, long sermon about resurrection, folks? No? Yes? Maybe? Maybe a short homily sort of about resurrection. How about that? Practice resurrection, the poet Wendell Berry says. I liked this concept of practicing resurrection. In an article, the Anglican priest Giles Fraser said, the resurrection is the name we give to the multiple ways we push back against the darkness. He says, do I believe in the resurrection? Of course I do. And I believe in it by frying bacon and refusing to give up. This Easter rising is not just some fancy intellectual idea, it's a form of praxis. UU minister Carl Gregg echoes these words in an article titled Practice Resurrection. He says, we should worry less about what people say they believe happened 2,000 years ago, and more whether we are living as if resurrection still happens. The question is, how are we partnering with God today, transforming despair into hope, apathy into compassion, hate into love, and death into new life? So, if resurrection is something we practice, what does it mean to practice resurrection? The story of resurrection is an old one, an eternal metaphor. Stories about life and death and rebirth occur all over the world, and they are powerful. The phoenix being born out of the ashes, Persephone returning to the earth after her time in the underworld, the ancient Saxon goddess Astra, or Easter, reviving a dying bird by transforming it into a bunny. These stories of resurrection are powerful because they speak to our deepest fears, our core, our fears of death, our fears about total annihilation. But also they speak to our deep beliefs that there must be something more, some greater meaning, some higher purpose. They speak to an ancient part of us. We know that after the seed is buried in the earth, the flower comes forth. The daffodils spring again. Gods and goddesses die and are reborn. This is more than metaphor. This is a practice of hope, a practice of the cycle of life and death. At the church the UU church in Michigan I grew up in, every Easter we would receive a small plant. I think it was a begonia. Some little small pink flowers in a little container. And we were to take it home and put it in a pot or plant it in the earth. Easter was about reaching into the mud and practicing resurrection by bringing life and beauty into the world again through small acts like planting a flower. It reminded us of resurrection, of life, and of growing things again after the winter. So when I say we need to practice resurrection, I definitely mean that we need to do those things that give us hope and invest in the world again after death and after the long winter. Two little things like an egg hunt, which can be seen as a secular celebration. It's old in its roots and its symbology. The egg, symbolizing life, is part of the Passover Seder. The egg is associated with that Saxon goddess Easter. People would decorate eggs and leave them as gifts for her. This is the time of year in many pagan wheel of the year cycles where the goddess conceives. And 9 months later, at Yule, at Christmas, she will bear a child. So both the egg and the bunny are very obvious symbols of fertility and life. And this is the time of year when birds are laying eggs, when trees are budding, and where evidence that life does come after death is found all around us. But by practice resurrection, I don't mean go home and read through the OWL curriculum exclusively, although that is one thing you can do. By practice resurrection, I also mean that we need to invest ourselves in the world, in revamping and regrowing the world after the cycles of death and destruction. Robert Fulghum writes in his book, From Beginning to End, "Nothing about being human amazes me more than this capacity for revival. How dull and meaningless and hopeless life can seem only to become exciting, vibrant, and filled with hope the next day. Whole nations come back from destruction and oppression when great problems get addressed and resolved. All of our exits may become entrances." He goes on, "The human capacity to take whatever life dishes out and to come back is never to be underestimating. How amazing it is, knowing we are all going to die anyhow, that we are so determined to live as well as we can, no matter what. For all our little deaths, we defy our fate and come to life again and again and yet again. Daily, we redeem ourselves in unspoken rituals of renewal." Fulghum continues, "Daily, we get up and go to work in the construction business of building and repairing and remodeling a life." One sentence in there stood out to me of Fulghum's: "The human capacity for resurrection is remarkable." Think about how we handle tragedy. After the Oklahoma City bombing, after 9/11, after Columbine and every school shooting since, after tornado and hurricaning and the devastating tsunamis, after tragedies great and small, we rally, we rebuild. And so too are we rallying after this pandemic, where hundreds of thousands of lives were lost. We resurrect, we sing, we say prayers, we leave tributes, we make memorials, and we rise from the ashes and we rebuild the city, the school, the infrastructure of society, the lives of our families after loss. This is the blessing of resurrection. This is the role of grace in our lives, that no matter how much pain and sorrow the human heart has borne, we can live on and love again and embrace a sunrise and rebuild nations. We are reborn to love, made whole again to curiosity, brought forth again to awe and wonder, resurrected to the fullness and wholeness of life. The story of the resurrection is one more example of how, at this sacred time of year, we are reminded of our resilience, our capacity to begin again and work for justice, for peace, for love, for those core messages that Jesus of Nazareth came to proclaim. Whether you believe in God or not, whether you believe in the resurrection of Jesus or not, this story of rebirth, of coming out of the tomb, of death and into new life, is a story of powerful love. It's a story of rebuilding of nations. It's a story that is valuable and powerful to us today. And so I really like this idea that resurrection isn't noun, but verb. It's not past event, but future action. It's not just a has been, it's a will do. We're going to practice resurrection. This is the kind of resurrection I can believe in: dropping eggs down into the grass, planting begonias, making more tracks than necessary like the fox, frying bacon, loving the world, fighting against empire, working for peace and justice. Resilience and resistance, this is the resurrection we need right now. This is the resurrection of our society into the beloved community. This is Easter morning. Happy Easter. Our next hymn is number 61, Lo, the Earth Awakes Again. I think, Brad, we're going to sing, what, the first 3 verses? First 3 verses that are listed. Please rise in body and spirit. May the spirit of Easter lead you to practice resurrection. May the spirit of Passover lead you on new paths to a new future. May the spirit of spring lead you to joy, to love, and to hope. Happy holidays, happy spring. As we join in our closing song and then in the Hallelujah Chorus, I want to remind you of 3 things. If you have bought a tulip, please take it with you. If you do not wish to take your tulip with you, please let me know and I will find a good home for it. If you have a plague in your pocket or nearby, please put it on that bench over there. And if you wish to join us for the Easter egg hunt, meet us on the back steps after. Now, please join in our closing song.
This year we will be finishing with our Hallelujah Chorus, and we have copies that we will bring around. I know usually we gather in parts, but because of COVID distancing, we're going to ask to stay in the congregations. So we'll bring these scores around. Just raise your hand if you'd like a copy of the Hallelujah Chorus, and we'll bring them around to you. I think we have it all. So here we go. Try and pick up your part from somewhere else in the room if you don't know it, and best of luck.